Go ahead, punk. Make me play.
This is Bumping Into That Sound.
Welcome to Bumping Into That Sound, the rock-centric music and tone podcast where we dive deep into the riffs, rhythms and stories behind your favourite artists, tracks and instruments. My name is Francis and I'm your host. Welcome back to part 2 of the Angry Anderson and Rose Tattoo podcast. If you haven't heard part 1 yet, stop this, do that first. It's going to make a lot more sense if you come into this from the beginning of part 1. If you're here having already heard part 1, thank you very much for coming back. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. To me, it was really something special. So I hope that you guys really enjoyed part 1, and I hope that you get a lot out of part 2 as well. We go down a similar sort of path where we're off in all different directions talking about all different things. So it's another great conversation. As always, you can head to bumpingintothatsound.com.au if you want to find out more, or you can check the show notes for links. Okay, let's not wait around. Let's go straight into part 2 with Angry Anderson. So I went back and I had a quick look at last week when we ran out of time, and you were telling me about how you've got Stevie's album. That's what you wanted to do more of some of Stevie's songs.
Yeah, I was going to more than likely I was more than likely going to originally I was going to do them on my solo albums or on albums that I originally sort of thought, well, they'll be my solo albums, and I but I never quite got I only did 2 with Mushroom, and then then that went sour. And well, the relationship soured because I gave them 2 albums. They had 2 big hits off the albums, which was a complete mystery to me that they couldn't make more of it. Like, there were other singles or other potential singles on both albums. So the first album, which I did with Mushroom, which they mistakenly, and they admitted the mistake, that they released it as a Rose Tattoo album because, and it was nothing like Rose Tattoo. The single suddenly came off that.
Right.
And so that'll give you an indication of how, how not like Rose Tattoo the album is. And the album is me writing in a different direction. Like, there's a song on that called Winnie Mandela, and I wrote that while I was reading the book about Winnie Mandela, about her life. This is before she was revealed to be morally and politically corrupt. But like, I wrote it from the point of view of a woman who's professed, and like, to all intents and purposes, she stuck by Nelson Mandela while he was incarcerated for 20 years or whatever it was. And I'd read his book, and then someone suggested, they said, "Oh, well, his missus Winnie Mandela's got a book out too." So I read her book, and so I wrote that song from there. And there's another song on it called "Calling," which is, I wrote that song after watching a documentary of Jacques Cousteau's son, who was captaining one of their ships. And he made this 10 years study. Well, it was an ongoing study, actually, but when he made the doco, he'd been studying the songs of whales through, dropping, obviously, mics into the water and following pods around. And he worked out, they fed all this information, all this data into computers, and they analyzed it, and it quickly revealed itself that they actually sing songs. So their language is songs. And those noises, those beautiful, haunting noises that they make, is them sing. And then what happens is that it seems that they'll have a songwriter within a pod.
Okay.
And this person will come up with notes or a phrasing, and then someone else in the pod, some pods are like, 20, 30 animals, in numbers. Sometimes they suspect even more. Well, they know that there's pods, with huge numbers, but some pods join other pods, which is another, because they're quite social whales. And so one will come up with an idea, and then they develop this song, which they all start singing. And then as they travel around, the waterways of the world, and, the resonance is underwater is as we know. I mean, sound travels a long way, and they sing at frequencies. This is another part of the magic, that they sing at frequencies that travel through water beautifully, like long distances. And as they travel around, they sing their pod song. And other pods might even be, like 50K away underwater, or 100 miles, or whatever it may be, and they'll hear this song, and then they'll pick it up and they'll sing it back to them.
Wow.
And then the other pod they'll add things to it, like they'll do their version. That's the simplest way of
like an evolution. It just continues through.
It evolves. Population.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So I wrote a song about it called "Calling," and I wanted that. Actually, they did release that as a single, to their credit, but they didn't understand the juxtaposition of. They could not quite marry the idea that Angry Anderson, singer for Rose Tattoo, would want to, or could produce, I don't know, but it would produce music that was nothing like, like completely, different to Rose Tattoo's music. And lyrically and melodically, it was just so far away from, which I thought, and I mean, really, when you think about it, it's a plus.
I would have.
Why would I try? Why would I try to mimic?
Yeah.
Now, which brings me to the second album I did with them, and I went to Los Angeles and lived there for almost a year, and wrote and recorded an album called Blood from Stone, because they said, look, we want something that's like, we don't know what to do with this hippy dippy shit you keep coming up with, right? So we want to, you've got to get back to what you're known for, which is heavy rock and roll. And I said, well, I don't want to replicate or try to duplicate what I did with the Tats.
Yeah.
Because that's what the Tats is for. And I always knew that sooner or later the Tats would get back together. So I didn't want to spoil that opportunity, by mimicking what I'd already done. So I had two options. I said, well, okay, why don't I do a blues album, like real blues, but like a modern adaptation. And they said, and I said, well, that's as close as I want to get to Rose Tattoo, because Tats has always just been a very loud blues band, right?
Yeah.
So that's what the Tats are. And most people know that, or they recognise that, Rose Tattoo has got its own thing, its own sound, its own approach, but it's basically just a very loud blues band. So I said, well, I'll go back further. I'll go back to we'll do an album of really rootsy sort of
like an
more
origin.
traditional,
Yeah, okay.
really traditional blues, and they didn't get that either. I said, well, how about we do like an album? If you want something that's really marketable, we do an album of covers, classics.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Rod Stewart was doing, like with singing some of the R&B blues classics, but even more rootsy than what he was doing. And they didn't get that either. So they sent me to Los Angeles to create a rock album. And I did with this wonderful guitar player, singer-songwriter, who I'm going to catch up with in a few days anyway, because we're off to Los Angeles next week. And Michael Slamer was his name. So we wrote and recorded that album, Blood from Stone. And we gave the two albums were 2 years apart. Suddenly it already become, like a huge hit, right? Particularly in England, but in Australia too, I mean. And so we did this, the second album, which was Blood from Stone, on the promise that they wouldn't release it as Rose Tattoo, or didn't want to call it Rose Tattoo, because when Suddenly was such a big hit of Beats from a Single Drum, the first album, they renamed it Angry Anderson album, which it should have been from the first place, but that was marketing department fucked that up. But having said that, so we give them Bound for Glory, which became a huge single here, and they said, well, we've got to follow it up. This is what I'm saying. So, like with the first album, they released Calling. They were hesitant, is the only word I can use, to promote it, because the film clip had whales in it, and it's, it was nothing like Rose Tattoo.
Ah, right.
And they said, softer. Well, yeah, they said, well, we don't think the public wants Angry Anderson singing about whales. I said, well, fucking let's do a film clip, which they did, to their credit. We spent money and we did a film clip. And let's put it out there and see what the public thinks. I mean, the whole fucking idea of making music is to give it to, the audience.
Yeah.
Right. Once the artist is done with bringing it into being, like writing the song, recording the song.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it suffered from a lack of promotion, and they begged to differ, of course, at the time. Anyway, to the second album. So undeniably, it's a rock anthem, Bound for Glory. It became a big song. And they said, we don't hear a follow-up single. And I think there's like 3 or 4 singles on that particular album. And we wanted to release Heaven, which is a big sort of chorusy song. And I was told by someone that was at the meeting that the head of publicity said, people are going to think it's like he's gone Christian.
Really?
Yeah, because the song, the chorus is Heaven is where I want to be. I want to see heaven. I mean, and it's about wanting to find, the lyric was promoted by, I was going through that period where I was really, truly discovering my spiritual identity, if you like, and my entity, realizing, as most people do at some stage of their life, well, there's more to life than the physical application. That's the one thing it's really important, because it's our first dimension, so to speak.
Yeah.
But what drives that? It's like when they talk about the universe. Well, like, what inspired the universe? I remember reading years ago a book called The God Particle, which is one of a handful of books that I've read about trying to explain how did it come about. you know. We did talk about that book that I'm
Yeah.
rereading at the moment. Yeah, well, that's part of this. That's part of that group of books that I bought many, many years ago that were all written about trying to demystify
Unravel the mysteries.
the mysteries,
Yeah.
and put some sort of, and that's why it says in the book rather beautifully, I think, there was no physical, there was no material. It was just a thought, for want of a better word, or an emotion, which is a better word.
Yeah.
And this emotion, if you like, or thought, and then of course, the skeptics will say, well, where did that come from? Well, does it really matter? I mean, maybe it's too large to try and comprehend, but it materialized or brought itself into being by materializing.
Yeah.
Like, and in the Bible and other great spiritual works, it says God, because the Holy Bible, the one we accept, the Christianic Bible, it's not the only religious work or spiritual work that has the same concept of God created man in his own image. Well, half a dozen books of different, spiritual stories, so to speak, all say the same thing. So it's not a story that's unique to the Christianic way of looking at the creation. The creation is mentioned in similar terms, regardless of what spiritual work from wherever in the world, from whatever time frame in the world, in our history, they all say the same thing. So it's a way, I suppose, of saying that man crystallizes ideas and emotions similarly, whether they're aware of one another. It's kind of like, okay, the Egyptians, Sumerians, Aztecs, Incas, Toltecs, Olmecs, they all studied astronomy.
Yeah.
And they carved astronomy or their observations, which must have been based over not just 10 or 20 years, but 50, 100, 300, 400 years.
Yeah.
They made observations and wrote down these constants, which they carved into stone. And they did this all simultaneously, unbeknownst to one another.
Yeah. Yeah.
From scattered around the world. So the spiritual teachers say that is the global consciousness. That's the consciousness that we all strive for singularly or individually. But there's a consciousness that is global. So in other words, we share thoughts, if you like, or energy around the globe. Getting back to calling, the whales shared these songs, anyway, like I said. So I present this song. So I'm sorry, I'm all over the place here today.
No.
I better have a coffee. So I said, well, what about Heaven as a second single after Bound for Glory? Yeah, Bound for Glory.
Yeah.
Heaven. Well, what is heaven? It's glory.
That's right. Yeah.
It's described as the glory in spiritual works, right? Which is another reason I didn't tell the people at Mushroom this story, because I thought this will confuse them even more. But I was going through a really intense spiritual awakening at that time. And it was a journey I'd been on since I was a kid. And I've been reading and I've been thinking and I've been digesting. And I think we talked about a few years I spent taking acid and having experiences and all that kind of stuff. And this thing culminated. It was a journey, like all purposeful, proper journeys in life are. It took years to unfold. So anyway, I wrote these. I wanted to, write these discoveries, feelings, and thoughts, and responses to the world around me that I was now discovering through you know, accepting that I was as much a spiritual being as I was a physical being. So as a dutiful or a responsible lyricist, like songwriter, the people I wrote songs with, or the few people I wrote, I explained these, and they got it, you know, because they're musicians. I mean,
Yeah, they have that depth about them. Yeah.
yeah. So we were able to collaborate, and they were able to help me express these things in music, with in song.
Yeah.
And we wrote some really good songs on that first album, Beats from a Single Drum, which they, like I said. Anyway, getting back to the second album. So I said, look, follow it up with, Bound for Glory. Just about every fucking cricket team, tennis team, fucking snooker team in Australia was using Bound for Glory as its fucking, kids told me that they used to play it over the loudspeakers in our area, the Northern Beaches here, when they'd run out onto the field.
Yeah.
And I was so chuffed. I thought, yeah, it's fucking brilliant. So anyway, we come to follow it up with Heaven, and they went, apparently it was mentioned at the meeting. They said, oh, fuck, now people are going to think that he's converted to Christianity. And I thought, why is that a negative thing? And that's when I realized that there was a growing resistance to anything that was spiritual in any way, particularly Christianity, because, the world was starting to move towards, and I sort of sensed that, or, I don't think it was paranoia, but I thought, you know what? It's to be spiritually aware is to be, the only people that were supposedly allowed to be spiritually aware were people from India who had beards and burnt incense, or hippies, So,
So the marketing department just couldn't get their head around it.
No, not at all, and
we're scared of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's your word. But I think you nailed it. I think they just, the way they expressed it was like, well, fucking, how do we market this? Because, they wanted everything black and white, like with no depth.
Yeah.
And they were used to, and that's not a criticism. I'm just saying they were able to market things that were simplistic, that they knew, okay, this is the song, it's called blah, blah. We've got a clip that says blah, blah, and we take it to the radio station and we put it on television and everyone gets it.
Yep. Comfortable conformity.
Brilliant turn of phrase. Conformity. Ooh, quick, write that down. No, absolutely. Comfortable conformity. Yes.
Yeah. And you can put FM radio after that too, and it all comes together.
Yeah, really. I got to say, though, that the new single's getting wonderful acceptance and around Australia, which we thought would be the hardest place, really.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is really good.
But, the link, and there's a clip now, which we did, and that's been sent around the world, and the few podcasts I've done, and I've got a couple more today, or one tomorrow, I think, I'm not sure, that are in America. And there's a couple of podcasters that have said, look, we'll come either to Los Angeles to talk to you person to person, and like, they're going to feature the band, which I think is fabulous.
Yeah,
because it's about time the boys in the band got some fucking recognition, because they're a great band.
Oh, 100%.
As good a lineup as we've ever had. They're fucking great.
One thing I wanted to give credit to, because I don't think it gets enough attention, is people like yourself and Axl Rose, the non-guitarist front person, be it a man or a woman, the ability to give space to the guitar. I find that to be underappreciated, because when you get a guitarist who's a singer, he understands how it all comes together. But then I think there's something special about guys like you who understand how important the guitar space is, even though you're front and center. You have that recognition and understanding of, I suppose, coming from a guitaring point of view, to let that space be filled, how important it is. And I don't think that gets enough appreciation.
If that's a compliment, thank you. I've see, the phrase "old school."
Yep.
It's been bandied around quite a lot in, like most pop words, or misogyny, racism, fucking blah blah, inclusion. But and they tend to distort the meanings. But old school is a way of understanding what was valuable about what we now see as the past.
Yeah.
And if it's still relevant today, right? So someone will say, like, oh, mate, fucking, he's as honest as the day is long. He's fucking old school, that cunt, And like, there you go. He's as honest as the day is long. He's old school. Because now, these days, honesty is associated with being old school.
Yeah, isn't that sad?
Well, it is sad. It is sad, Francis, because the thing about it is a lot of young people think it's all right to be dishonest.
Yeah.
It's like remember the old saying, old school saying, is it's only a rort if you get caught.
Yeah.
It's only a crime if you get fucking caught, in other words, like, but yeah, there's a lot of kids there, but being old school. So the old school thing, it all started with a guitar and a voice. I mean, or it started with accompaniment. I mean, you listen to some of those, and there are actually recordings around. Some brilliant person made recordings of road gangs singing. And they would move their feet in time, and it would create a rhythm thing, because the chains, you could hear the boom, and they'd be dragging the chain, swinging the pick, bang, or the hammer, crushing rock, whatever they were doing. So there was a rhythm, and that was the first accompaniment. And the next accompaniment was, like I said, the embodiment of all that was, obviously, brown people sitting on us, as we call them, black people. I just find that really uncomfortable. But never mind, I'll compromise. But so some of these guys that were the first blues singers, and part of the magic of that, when you first hear these guys, stomping on the floor, and he's picking, so he's singing these short phrases, but the whole time it's the plucking. So without it, there's no movement, there's no punctuation, there's
life to it. It breathes life.
The flow, absolutely, yeah. And so really, I suppose, in a sense, the singer in the band is there to bring attention to the guitar players. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, because
it's a thing that's special. Because
in a rock and roll band, it's essential, mate.
Yeah. And I think the people that get it without even realizing, and some musicians have an ego and all the rest of it, and a lot of them probably do, but even the ones that do all that don't, but the ability to get it, to say, well, even though I'm front and center, my name's on the bill, I have to leave all this space for the guitarist to come through and then fill that space and create that energy. It's you know, sometimes it's just some people get it, some people don't. And I think there's a special credit due to a good frontman that gets it, such as yourself. You know, you're the nucleus of the cell, but you understand everything around it comes together such an important way.
Absolutely. I mean, I like we're one of the few bands that actually jams now. Like
Yeah.
that moves like because you're jamming within the framework of the arrangement anyway.
Yep.
And it's usually when the solo comes, instead of it being 8 bars or 16 bars or 12 bars long, I'll just turn to the guitar player and I'll go, you know, in other words, you're reading the vibe.
Yeah. Adapting to the room.
And if I turn to one of the guitar players and give them the nod, they've already reading the vibe. They know it's cooking. They know they're on fire. They know the audience is feeding back this fucking energy.
Yep.
And it's just, we can take it further, boys. Let's fucking go.
Yeah.
So, you know, you hit the clutch, you drop it back a clog and fucking hit the fucking accelerator and away you go. And the guitar players just fly.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't happen every night in every song. It just happens every now and again. And there are some songs we do which we're known to traditionally jam in, and they're mostly the boogies, you know, like Bad Boy, Outlaw, you know, one of the boys, not so much. Yeah, one of the boys, the Out, we sometimes jam in. Nice Boys, of course. We do a sort of like a medley sort of revisit the old days sort of vibe, you know. I invoke sort of other singers, and you know, there's a jamming thing that goes on, and it depends on the night. Sometimes it can be only 3 minutes, and I think that's enough. You know, we're retaining the energy. We've got this. We've just got to fly home now. So I give a whistle, and we're into the out choruses, and there's other times when it like someone once told me once that the jam part went for 12 minutes.
Wow.
And in the old days, 12 minutes was, you know, it's just
look at Oopa Purdue, how long that went for. Yeah,
well, absolutely. See, and there's another one. Well, see, he was a guitar player, singer, so he understood about giving both his instruments, which is his voice and his guitar, space to be and place to travel to. But yeah, I think it's a smart member of any band, particularly a singer who knows the strength of his own band and allows that. Because, I mean, thinking you know, in a mercenary sort of sense, which is the wrong word, but there's a lot to be gained from doing that. I mean, if you let a band sing, you've given the audience more, because it's something that wasn't scripted.
Yeah, and you can't get it at home on a CD.
No, and it might never happen again.
Yeah,
not that particular night. In fact, it never would, because they don't tend to play. I mean, they don't. The two of them, my two boys, play different every night. I mean, they'll play certain things the same or similar.
Yeah.
Because they use things as trigger points, right? They'll play something and I'll go, yeah, that's a very familiar lick, you know, and they might do it for 16 bars, play something familiar, and then all of a sudden something comes out of left field because they've been working towards that.
Yeah.
But that's a personal thing. That's them. That's what they want to bring to the occasion, and they're the only ones who know. So they lead the band. They've been given, it's like giving a horse its head.
Yeah.
Right. Like when you want a horse to gallop, you know, you give it its head, right? You don't hold it back. You slap off on the reins, and the horse knows I can go.
Time to go.
Yeah.
It's this, and I think too, the other thing you guys do so well when watching other, especially younger bands, and I think this comes down to being master craftsmen like yourselves, is you're not afraid to slow the song down. Like when you have those bluesy slow downs, like in Bad Boy, and there's just that thumping that's happening, and it's captivating. It's not a million miles an hour. It's just that burble of the V8 just sitting there
Yeah,
burbling and burbling away, and it's just
idling.
yes, and it's intoxicating. It just draws you in, and you're
Yeah.
feeling that thump. Where I think other bands are afraid, they feel like they need to have the foot to the floor from the start of the set to the finish of the set. That's the only way to do it.
Mm.
But I think there's a lot to be learnt from watching the masters like yourself know when to bring that in, and it just collectively builds up again. It's just something magical about those moments. That really you can't you've got to experience it. Maybe it's a thing that the masters have, and I think every young band should turn up someone like yourselves while we're still lucky enough to have it happening and experience how to use that energy force and not be afraid of a slowdown.
Brilliant observation. Thank you again. If that's a compliment for all, I mean, the boys, of course, I'm very proud of my band, as you know.
Yeah,
But
rightfully so.
they are fucking masters. I often say of Dougie DeMarco that he's the best backbeat drummer in the when he's just playing time in those moments when it pulls right back and the guitars might be just muting. They're like they might even be playing. It's just him and the bass player, Kingy.
Yeah.
At the moment, Kingy's playing bass with us, but yes, it is. And we all want as a band, but as a front man, I want that what you just articulated. I want that to go out to the audience so that they can lock in on it because it's the heartbeat.
Yeah.
And I often say, look, and I'll start clapping on the beat. And then I'll say, don't resist it. It's irresistible.
Yeah.
And then I liken it to the heartbeat and I liken it to, you can feel that in your soul. And all this has been said before, like me learning off the masters. I mean, all the, the Jerry Lee Lewises and the fucking, the real rhythm kings, the people who, Little Richard, all the people that I invoke, on stage, that's where I learned, whatever, tricks or skills or whatever. But, it's because they knew that, I mean, Little Richard used to do this fantastic thing. I've seen him do it live, playing the same thing over and over again because it's hypnotic, because it's organic. It comes from within the body. And well, let's hope this is a better connection than the other day.
Well, thank you very much. I won't keep you, and I don't want to bombard you with any more questions because I'm appreciative of just being able to say thank you to you properly for the time we spent
when
together.
You say any more questions, do you have more questions?
Oh, I could talk to you for days.
Well, we can do that later. But I just thought, just for this particular session, and we were supposed to be talking about the single. Good news is I got a report from this morning.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read too much into it because sometimes you don't count your chickens, but most of the time you do count your chickens. But Australian radio, which has been hesitant, let me say hesitant in the past with anything we released, like I won't name them, but they're sort of one of the supposedly leading FM stations right around the country. And they said, look, with the last album, which was 2009, which I think is a very fine contemporary modern for its day, a very, a worthwhile and relevant rock and roll album. Got some beaut songs that are really fucking good songs on it. And it was written to acknowledge the passing of all the past members. But at the time of recording, Mick was in his last, they gave him a year, 6 months to a year. And indeed, after we finished the album, he lasted less than a year, way less than a year, and so we knew it was our last go around, not only for him and I on a personal basis as a songwriting team, and but also for him to play, on his last Rose Tattoo album. And as so that was fairly significant, but it was very important to myself and Mick, because we've the albums that we wrote together, which is the first album, the second album, Assault Battery, and then the last, the only other album that he wrote and played on was Blood Brothers, and it was a real disappointment for me to have the supposedly cutting edge, or the rock and roll stations say, look, it's really, really hard breaking, unless it's a pop thing, we'd rather play the old stuff, and we said, well, yeah, okay, we get it. I mean, you can play the old stuff, but why not play the new stuff?
Yeah.
And they said, well, it's hard to sort of play new sort of pub rock albums or tunes, like songs, to get, because there's a new demographic, that is our audience. And so they degenerated into that sort of selector pick, computer fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
So DJs lost their personal touch, and it became very obvious that their stations had lost their personalities, because the personality was made up of the DJs having a personality.
Yep.
And back in the day, they weren't just sort of, like would-be comedian type. Most of them are very young. They know fuck all about the history of Australian music. Couldn't give a fuck for a start about.
No, that's right. It's just a paying gig for them, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and even the music that they were playing was all our early stuff. Well, not all. They only played about 2 or 3 tunes of our early stuff. But Chisel and Angels, Ad Nauseam, Midnight Oil. And to their credit, they even played things like the Saints, and the Mentals. Radiator's got to look in every now and again. The Choir Boys, lots, but it was always just the one song.
Yeah. There's one thing over and over. Which I found an odd concept.
And I remember saying to Mark, well, it's because they thought they know better or knew better, and they fucking don't. You got to listen to the public. And I was in there doing a promo once, and one of the old school people that worked in this particular office down in Bondi that this particular station was run out of, said to me, mate, they even ignore the request sheets. I mean, they do request sheets, like people ring up and say, can you play this, can you play that? So they've got to note it down. And he said, we get lots of requests for yourselves, the Tats, and other bands that don't get a run, mainstream. And, we keep saying, but, the whole thing's got to be about variety, and about, because bands come out with different sort of. Anyway, it was the sort of the beginning of radio losing its heart and soul. And when I say degenerated into, I picked that, I choose that word very carefully, because that's what it was. And I am led to believe, and getting back to our ads now on right across the country, apparently, a lot of country stations have come in and said that they want interviews, but they also want, they want to play the single. And anyway, plus the other thing, is that I'm still toying around with the idea of, very much so, of doing like a lower profile band, obviously. That's just, like based on my, we talked about my fascination with the Faces, which I think is, for my music, for my tastes,
Yep.
they were the greatest, rock and roll band as far as I was concerned, only because of my personal taste, because they covered really beautifully a lot of that, that traditional R&B stuff. But they, with the originals they wrote, they had that wonderful, I mean, Ronnie Lane was just a beautiful songwriter. I mean, I don't know, are you familiar with the band's material much at all? Yeah.
Not much, no.
Well, mate, I'm just saying, if you've got a spare hour or two,
Yeah.
go back and listen to some of those early Faces albums.
Yep, I will.
I think Ronnie Lane, who was the bass player, I mean, he's a fucking amazing bass player. I mean, they were just a gifted band because it was the right combination, as all great bands are.
Yeah.
But they got sort of swallowed up in they weren't, I suppose, in a real sense, they weren't an arena band. They didn't write songs that were big anthemic, songs. They just wrote, like when you hear the material, they wrote beautiful songs. I mean, and evidence of that is like when Ronnie went out solo. I mean, have you ever heard a more beautiful song than Maggie May? I mean, it's just fucking. And he wrote this unbelievably beautiful, tragically beautiful song about a gay guy, and apparently it was based on a true story. And it's just epic. It's a real. It's like Maggie. It's just a beautiful piece. It's kind of like a mini suite.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's called The Killing of Georgie, and the character Georgie, and apparently that was his real name. He was a gay guy in New York, and he went out one night and was killed because he was gay. And it's just but when you hear it, you'll know what I'm saying. It's just so beautifully written. I mean, the lyrics are to die for. And the music is just extraordinary. So, I'd like to get into that kind of more melodic, pick up where I left off after fucking beats from a single drum, because even though that wasn't like the Faces, but it was me, exposing or expressing both. The other side.
The other side of you. Yeah. Which hasn't had as much exposure.
Well, yeah, exactly. And as I was trying to, I don't know whether I was very diplomatic, but I was trying to be, it's kind of like, when you try to see the positive out of any situation, no matter how bad or tragic or whatever it is. I mean, that, compared to some of the things that I've had to accept, if you like, it was small potatoes, but at the time it was devastating. But then again, I remember I was drinking one time with my then partner, and I was bemoaning the fact, I said, I fucking completely fucking misunderstood. That was what they said. They said, well, we don't understand where all this is coming from. We don't understand how to fucking market Angry Anna from Rose Tattoo, which is still very much alive in everyone's mind, and I fully, I said to the record company when I joined Mushroom as a solo artist, I said, I'm still going to write and record and perform with Rose Tattoo. And they said, well, we want Rose Tattoo, And I said, well, okay, when it becomes again into physical form, and we form another band lineup. I said, but at the moment there isn't one, and there's me. So I've signed to the label, and only to be told when I produce what I think is, a fairly good album. And yeah, they said, well, we really don't know how to market this. You know, like how people are going to, like I said to you the other day, how
Yeah.
they said to me, how do we explain, you know, like, and I thought to myself, it's not your fucking place to explain me.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's for me to explain me, you know.
Yeah.
But they said, how do we explain to the public that Angry Anderson wants to sing songs about the language of Wales after writing things like Can't Be Beaten and Scar for Life and shit like that? You know, it's
Yeah.
like, and I said, well, you know, other people have done it. You know, it's like,
that shouldn't be an issue.
but
at all.
anyway, my partner then, God bless her socks, looked at me straight in the eye and said, "This is a woman who takes no shit but gives no quarter." And she's just listen to what you fucking said, you idiot. And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "What did you just say?" I said, "Well, they told me that, you know, they didn't understand." So I said, I'm misunderstood. And she said, "You're fucking Angry Anderson. You're supposed to be misunderstood."
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, gee whiz, you know, trapped by my own whatever that is, notoriety or fucking, you know, whatever. And I thought, well, she's right, you know. And I said, Jesus, I said, thanks. It was like a slap in the face. But so anyway, the thing about it is, you know, well, you know, I mean, there's going to be a new set of songs, album, if you like, in the not too distant future, with the lineup. And I've also got plans to write and record with past members.
Right. Okay. That's
But only
cool.
write and record.
Yep.
And yeah, so you know, it's you know, it may be all over. You know, when I say all over, I've compromised in the sense, the way that, like, Scotty said to me, well, what if Europe wants you to tour after? And I said, well, it's kind of like cheating, you know, like you say, like, okay, this is the last year, and then, you know, you get a great offer, you know. And I said, we haven't got the luxury of leaving it a few years, because I'll be fucking in my 80s and maybe locked up in some fucking home, you know, like, I don't know, you know, like I might be, you know, I don't know. I just, you know, who knows what's going to happen. But,
Well, I think if you're clear about it being wrapping up as a permanent fixture, but the door's open to special events, I think that's the sweet spot for everyone. Then no one's going to be like, "Oh, you said you were finishing," and you're going to be like, "Well, this is the last guarantee. We might be back, but I'm guaranteeing this next 12 months."
yeah, I think, like, it's like when we were sort of articulating it for, you know, like within the management, the band, and I said, you know what? I said, probably what I'm saying the most, and it's not that I you know, because I love the pubs, I love playing in pubs, I love the intimacy of it, you know, I love the vibrancy of, like, because, like, when you do big stages and, like, there's 30,000 people in front of you, blah blah blah, there's an intimacy with that too, but it's transposed, if you like, or projected out on a much larger scale, and that's why, you know, when you're doing big stages, why you tend to move a lot, you know, like, you know,
Kind of
if you
fill that space.
yeah, and so there's not that proximity.
Yeah.
So you've got to sell something else, and which is why, getting back to songs, that the most successful arena bands write songs that fit the situation. So the big songs, they're all mid-pace, because everyone can get onto that thing, you know.
Right.
The Stones are fucking, you know, like, even though I was watching this thing about Zeppelin, and I mean, one of my favourite things musically has always been Zeppelin. The first time I heard it, I just thought, fuck, that's magic. And, you know, of course, we didn't know how big Zeppelin was going to be, but what they were doing on their first vinyl was like, that was musical magic, right? So but the most successful songs, the most successful acts, like you get, well, the Stones are great at it, but I think the top of the heap has always been AC/DC, as far, but because it's very personally close to my heart.
Yeah.
But you get those. You see, that's why Bruce Springsteen's so enormously, popular. Pete Seeger, have been listening to in recent months. The three Pete Seeger albums that I've got, and like Hollywood Nights and those kind of songs, that they were written with that bigger picture in mind, and as opposed to I suppose you don't intend to write little songs, but you always try to write a song that means something.
Yeah.
To somebody. I mean, first of all, it's got to mean something to you. And then, of course, as we've discussed before, then it can mean something to somebody else because they resonate. Or it resonates with them, the feeling that you had, because they identify with it,
Yeah.
And, but, the things like, I was watching this, it's probably 6 months ago, and it was, a documentary on AC/DC, and I had actually watched a whole set of theirs for years, but it was a doco, and it was on one of the things, and like Hell's Bells, and just a bunch of their songs. Most of the stuff on Back in Black.
Yeah.
But again, they had the master of production for stadium rock in John Lang, and he guided, Def Leppard. Who else has he worked with?
Bryan Adams, I think he did a lot of work with.
I mean, so all these, he was able to produce songs for a big stage.
Yeah.
For a big audience, right? So they transposed. I mean, I love Bryan Adams. I went and saw him live once, and he had 3-piece band.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was fucking amazing. It was just, he played guitar, there was a bass player and a drummer. They were fucking on fire for a start.
Jeez.
What a cracking good band. But, he works just as well with a 3-piece band that he does with, like 6, I think I saw him, and, 2 guitar players apart from himself, or 1 guitar player, keyboard player, bass player, drummer. And there was a couple of other people doing backup vocals and girls. And
that's what I pictured. I pictured a big production.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it was as entertaining because of the songs.
Yeah.
He was just as entertaining with a 3-piece band as he was with this like 6-7-piece band,
Wow.
Yeah, it's
it's a reflection, isn't it? When you're good at you've got the right skill set and you've got that backing behind you. Yeah, you can just bring it.
Yeah. But I mean, Mutt Lang, John Lang, had a way of looking past the song to where it could go. George and Harry had that gift as well, and any good producer does. But John Lang had this way of, look at he did with Shania Twain. I mean, there's 1,000 country singers that are just as good as she is that you'll never hear of. There's something extraordinary about her.
Yeah, and she's a superstar in that market, isn't she? Yeah.
Because she's a hot-looking babe. She looks good in shorts or a little mini skirt with cowboy boots,
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, watching it. Anyway, she knows stagecraft very well.
Yeah.
But she had those big songs.
Yep.
Big songs. So a bit of trivia for you. the guy that co-wrote Suddenly with me plays bass with Billy Joel, has done for years and years and years. And he's an Adelaide boy.
Oh, wow.
But he played bass and for a while was MD for Shania.
Really?
Yeah, Andy Shishon. Yeah, he's fucking brilliant.
And does he still live here in Adelaide? Or
No. He lives in New York
now?
because he's Billy Joel's, like, he's like his full time. Because they do quite a bit of work in America that you don't hear about. They work a lot, but often enough, so keep his orders because he loves to work. Bill, Billy, he's a lovely bloke. But Andy. Actually, see, now there's another thing. It's another thing I'd like to explore. Andy and I wrote some really good songs. We co-wrote half of the Beats from a Single Drum album, which suddenly came off, and which was the first Mushroom solo album, supposedly solo album. The one that they didn't understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he co-wrote a lot of those songs, Calling, Winnie Mandela, and
so there could be a thing there where you could come
well,
back
I've always wanted to. We did some demos for songs, Andy and I, before we left to go to live in New York or in America. Just in the sort of the year after the Beats from a Single Drum album came out, and so that was like mid '80s. Yeah, and so we got I've got a bunch of demos that we did where we started writing these songs, and they were going further than the songs on Beats from a Single Drum, so they were we were holding them back, so to speak.
Oh, because it was maybe too much.
Well, yeah, we didn't want to freak everyone out, but we ended up doing that anyway. So, but some really nice ballads type songs, slower songs, and some quite interesting lyric ideas. Actually, I used one of the lyric ideas on the album a couple of years later that I did in 80. Just trying to think of the year, but I went and lived in Los Angeles and wrote again another solo album for Mushroom called Blood from Stone, and the single that was a hit here was Bound for Glory. That was on that album. Right. And there's a song on that album called Bad Days, which is about prophecy. And that idea was started with Andy. I had this lyric, and we were looking for a tune, and we never quite found the right tune for it. But we found one of the tunes that this is going to get confusing because no one knows what I'm talking about, but one of the tunes that we were trying to make work with that lyric, there's another song that I wrote about alchemy, which is one of the songs I'd like to work with Andy on, like in a couple of years' time when I'm so it's not all over for me. I mean, obviously the other guys, travel on because they're all great in their own right. I mean, and they're all much younger, so they can go on and play because life goes on. Let's face it.
Well, you're still a young man, really. I mean, you don't for your age group. You got to be pushing 10, 15 years lower. Really.
That was the most appropriate. That was the most appropriate thing you could have said. Thank you. That's very gracious. But my kids say to me, Dad, why does everyone think? I said, it's just how you look at life. At the end of the day, when they say what's attitude? Well, what's attitude? One attitude can be, well, I don't care. that's an attitude.
Yeah.
Well, in my case, I do. And the passion I have for life, if you like, or see, right, like I said before at the beginning, and it's a good place to finish today's session anyway. Come around full circles is that I want over the next few years, apart from, we're working on this book, so that'll take up a lot of time. So in coming months, so we need to get that done. But then at the same time, there's a lot of writing I want to do, as I want to write stuff, I want to give my opinion on or my view of, and not to change the course of history or anything like that, but I mean, just to promote thought and hopefully even emotional responses. But, like as an artist, and when I've read the biographies or of the great artists, whether they be singer-songwriters or whether they be sculptors or painters or poets or whatever, and novel writers, that's the thing is that over a lifetime, your artistic bent, obsession, curse, gift, whatever people like to say, it needs to evolve too. So you express yourself in different ways, So on that note,
a few things for you. I wanted to make a very heartfelt thank you for the 3.5, 4 sessions that we've spent together, because I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I've got lost in the moment. I think it's just been such a beautiful time listening to you and learning from you. So I've really enjoyed it, and I'm really appreciative of all your time.
Thank you.
Second thing I want to thank you for is your contribution and the band's contribution. And I know the thanks is in the album sales and the ticket sales, but if I had to, I really want to just, I'm sure people already do, but express the thank you for what you've given and the years and years you've given it, despite anything that's come your way. It's always been there. It's been a staple item of the Australian music industry. But even further than that, to think about, I'm sure they were always going to do well, but we may not have even had the Guns N' Roses we do had we not have had the Rose Tattoo that was before them.
Well, I mean, thank you, Francis. It's a very generous thing to have said, all of that. But just going back to Axl, he actually articulated it in that language. He said there wouldn't be a Guns N' Roses without Rose Tattoo. What he meant is that there wouldn't be in the form that we see.
Yes. Yep.
And arguably, see, if you can write a song like Child of Time or Child in Time, a Child of Time, you're writing songs you're writing the right songs, but that's not always just the answer. Sometimes there's more to it, and to their credit, they've got it. They've got that marketable magic. They had the songs, but they follow it up, with the imagery and the whole drama and the romance of the bad boys and blah blah blah. So all the bits fell in place. But I do, and I've said it to his face. I said I'll always be very grateful that you actually said that, because another thing too is that's an honesty. Yeah, he didn't have to say that.
Yeah,
and he didn't to his, when people criticize him and I think, he's playing the game. They're all playing the game. They all know the game.
Yeah,
they grew up. Well, they didn't grow up, but they formed the band in Los Angeles. They know the business. They know how to schmooze,
create a hype and a mystique.
Absolutely, and play it up, and they did that, and it was very clever and it was very purposeful and very clever and that's why they got rewarded for it. I mean, there's a dozen other bands over there that I think deserved, space in that sort of area of fame, and they never did. They never got there. Because I saw bands over there when I was living there that were sort of up and coming, being talked about bands, as were Guns N' Roses when I was there in '89. Was it '89? I think. Anyway, when I was there writing the songs and recording Blood from Stone, and and any one of them deserved because of their talent.
Yeah.
But as we both understand, I mean, talent's just one component that you have to have.
Yeah, a lot of other stars have to line up.
Absolutely, yeah.
No,
And
you've obviously been a huge part of their sound and image, and it's, I don't think it would have been as special had the foundation brick not have been laid by Rose Tattoo.
Thank you, Francis.
Appreciate
it.
No, look, I appreciate your time and everything you've done.
Well, we're not done with it yet.
That's a wrap on part 2, one that I thoroughly enjoyed making. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. Make sure that you do keep an eye on the YouTube channel, because I will be posting some videos on there of the shorter stories to make it appeal more to those that just want to hear the one story or captions of those stories. While you're here, make sure you check out some of the other shows on this channel. You can also head over to the original podcast, which is called Bumping Into. That's the one with a wide range of guests and conversations, not so much music-centric. If you're wanting to find out more about this episode, anything that was mentioned on this episode or this podcast, you can head to the new website, which is bumpingintothatsound.com.au. Find the episode page, and I always do my best to list follow-up links and details that make it easy for you to find out more. Thanks again for stopping by, and I'm looking forward to bumping into you next time.